Hi, I'm a 19-year-old guy who was slowly turning into a turtle. That might sound like some weird Kafka story or a sci-fi movie, but I assure you it's not. I was born with a rare disease known as congenital melanocytic nevi. Basically, it's a skin disorder marked by strange growths on the outside of my body. There aren't a lot of cases in the world, but there was one of a young boy by the name of Didier Montalvo, and he had the same disorder that I do. He was 8 years old, and he was in Colombia. They coined him the Turtle Boy because of developing what looked like a turtle shell on his back, and that's what I have to look forward to. Didier traveled from Colombia to the UK to meet with other kids suffering from the same disease and also to have the growth surgically removed. Apparently his growth, it did look exactly like a turtle shell coming out of his back. It was 20% of his entire body weight. Well, I didn't want to end up like that kid, but it looked like that was exactly what was happening to me. My parents knew of my condition at birth when it first appeared in the form of a strange mole and then several moles on my back. As I got older, year after year the moles seemed to get bigger, to the point where they were actually moving towards each other, joining into one large growth. The funny thing is, I'd always been obsessed with this short story written a long time ago by a guy named Franz Kafka called The Metamorphosis. In the story, a guy turned into a cockroach. Now, although he awoke, transformed, mine happened over years and years. I felt I could relate, though, sort of a kinship with the character in the story. There weren't a lot of 14-year-olds who read Kafka, but my dad's an English teacher and there were always all sorts of strange books lying around the house. When other dads were taking their sons camping and fishing, mine was reading Shakespeare to me and prattling on about King Arthur. Kafka was my first literary love, and the story haunted me. I never understood why until my deformity first started to show. As I got older, my back moles were getting worse. They were getting so big they were forming one large giant mole, and it looked like a turtle shell. It looked hideous. It was extremely uncomfortable, too. I mean, if you can imagine what it would be like to constantly have to carry around a 20-pound sack of potatoes on your back and you couldn't even put them down even when you went to bed, well, you'd be close to getting what it was like living my life. I couldn't go to regular school. I was too embarrassed. Kids were, of course, mean to me. I was homeschooled, which was pretty easy with my dad already being a teacher. My mom did the math and science side, and my dad, he took on the English and social studies side. I had a well-rounded education, but a non-existent social life. I would literally sit in front of my bedroom window looking out and watching life pass me by. I watched kids my age walking to school, learning to drive, holding hands, playing, running, jumping, just being kids. What's worse is I had a brother, a perfect brother. He was 2 years older than me, and he was the apple of my parents' eyes. Good-looking, popular, and amazing soccer player, nothing wrong with him. The whole town knew him. They loved him. And then there was me, slowly getting more and more deformed with every day. It was hard not to get depressed. The surgery that it would take to make a difference on me, it couldn't be performed until I was older and had already gone through my major growth spurts. So that meant living with my condition while it progressed for years on end before there was ever going to be hope of a different life. Books were my one comfort. I could disappear into a good story, and I could become anyone, anywhere, anyone but myself sitting in between the walls of this house. Books were my escape from reality. I became a great mental traveler. I used to pick a different place almost every week and spend that entire week reading the literature of that culture, immersing myself into learning about its history, religion, any defining features. I dreamed about actually being able to explore the world one day, but I felt my chances of actually doing so were slim to none. I watched my brother move out and head off to college. He'd gotten an amazing scholarship based on his soccer skills, and it was going to earn him an Ivy League education. Life was looking pretty good for him, as usual. As I approached my 17th birthday, my annual assessment from my specialist was near. I wondered why we were even bothering with it. I mean, every time he said the same thing. We just have to watch and wait for now until he stops growing. I didn't realize that this time it was going to be different. sat me down, took my measurements, took x-rays of my spine, and told me it looked like I was through with the majority of my growth spurts and that if me and my parents agreed, the surgeries to remove my turtle shell could finally be performed. I looked up expectantly and we all knew what to say. Yes, of course! My first surgery was scheduled for 2 weeks later. I didn't want to hope, but I found myself entertaining for the first time in my life the possibility that life could actually improve for me. My brother and both of my parents were there for that big day. I was prepped, wheeled away down a long, cold hallway by myself, surrounded by medical professionals, but feeling completely alone. I woke up sore, but immediately I felt how much lighter my load was. Within a few days, I was able to move around and even start to lift small weights. My next surgery was scheduled for a month later, after I'd fully healed and recovered from my first surgery. The next surgery went just as well as the first. It took a little longer to bounce back from, though. My back was still very sore and tender from the first surgery, and now I've had this second surgery, so I needed more time of rest before I could move around. Still, I was excited. Every time I looked in the mirror, I couldn't believe the change. I was smaller, lighter. My hunched-over posture that had developed from years of living with the weight of that growth on my back was finally starting to straighten out. I never thought I'd be able to stand even close to upright, you know? But now here it was. I could actually see that as a possibility in the near future. I spent a lot of time in that hospital bed, read a lot of books, a lot of Kafka. I think I read The Metamorphosis probably 10 times or more, and each time I seemed to get something new from it. I felt like I was going through a reverse metamorphosis now, where I was returning to my original form, one that I'd forgotten even existed. 4 more long, painful surgeries later, and the last of that huge turtle-shaped shell was removed from my back. They were worried about infection from the many surgeries, so I had to stay in the hospital for quite some time, but day by day I started to get stronger and I was more able to move around a little bit more each day. A month after my last surgery, my surgeon came in to give me an assessment. He had me do all sorts of movements to test my flexibility and range of motion, and then he had me lift different weights to test my overall strength. He said I was doing amazingly well. He had no concerns other than I should take things slow at first and continue to rest at home for a time. Well, that meant I was released from the hospital. I was almost able to stand completely upright now, but I could only stand unassisted for a couple of minutes at a time, and then I'd start to collapse due to exhaustion. My spine and general posture had adjusted to that growth that I'd been carrying my entire life, and trying to adjust for its absence now was actually a lot harder than I thought it would be. It took a lot of visits to a chiropractor who helped adjust my spine to a straighter alignment, a lot of special stretches and exercises I had to do at my own house a lot, and a special anti-inflammatory diet designed by a dietitian. 6 months after that last surgery, I decided it was going to be the first day I walked out the front door upright and proud, instead of shriveled up and ashamed. I admit I did kind of puff out my chest a bit. I held my head dramatically high and swung that front door open wide. Of course, there was nobody actually there at the time to see me do it, but I still imagined the entire town snapping its head to look my way. I imagined teenage girls whispering about who's this new guy. I just couldn't help myself. I was intoxicated at the possibility of finally having a normal life. I was enrolled in high school the next semester, and I actually started going to school with kids my age. I had a locker, a bike, friends, a desk, and best of all, a girlfriend. I waited a long time and spent a lot of years looking out that window. But now I was out there, in the world, no longer just watching it, but engaging with it. And it felt beyond what I'd ever dreamed or hoped for. To watch more animated story videos like this, hit that subscribe button and tell us in the comments section what you thought about this story.